Okay, we'll begin. Are there questions from last time?
Sir,
Yes, go ahead, please.
can we use statistical mechanics? Let's say, after the Big Bang, there were also primordial black holes, right?
Yes.
So, can we use statistical mechanics to study their behavior, like the number of black holes that are present in our universe?
Yeah, you could. I mean, eventually, of course, you have to do statistical mechanics, but you also have to know the production mechanism, for example, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just equilibrium statistical mechanics. As long as you have the production mechanism, right, together with statistical mechanics, then you can analyze it.
Okay.
Right? Just like, I mean, the neutron fraction, for example, we calculated, right? And we couldn't determine it just by using statistical mechanics, right? Because the system goes out of equilibrium. But nevertheless, we could use part of the information from statistical mechanics and set up the appropriate equation for dx and dt, and evolve it. So a similar analysis can also be done for primordial black holes. Once you understand the production.
But after time, I think there will never be an equilibrium, right? Because after some, they are only going to be evaporated away after some time, and there's no way we can form those black holes.
Well, you could form them by collapsing.
But
right?
Those will take infinite amount of time, right?
No, not really. Meaning they will take infinite amount of time from our viewpoint. Right? But from our viewpoint, you don't have to call them black holes, right? There are some nuggets, okay, which you may see that the horizon is shrinking forever, okay, with infinitely slow speed. But as far as their effect on the universe is concerned, you can just think of them as particles and study them. I mean, you are worried about this infinite amount of time because of the horizon receding at infinite time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that will not be relevant for the evolution of the universe, for example.
So
right? Because that only relies on the fields far away.
So we could think of them as like clumps and.
Exactly. So you think of them as some particles, right? Maybe heavy particles, which may be relativistic, non-relativistic, and then you analyze them accordingly.
Okay.
Are there other questions? Okay, so let me recall where we were. So we had defined this fraction, if you remember, yi as ni over nb, and ni is the number density of ith type nucleus So this includes, for example, deuteron, He3, H3, He4. Okay, these are the nuclei which are relevant for our analysis. But it also includes N and P, right? We'll include N and P in this list. So Yn and Yp are also relevant quantities. And then you want to know what is the equilibrium, what is the final values of Yi that we should see today. Okay. And again, as I have already emphasized, okay, the systematic procedure will be to set up appropriate evolution equation dy dt as rate of creation minus rate of destruction So this is obtained by processes in which I appears in final state and this will involve processes in which I appears in the initial state because that removes And then you have to know the cross sections for these various processes and then subtract and evolve it. Okay? And in fact, that's the way the modern analysis of nucleosynthesis is done, okay, to actually determine the values of yi. What we are describing is a shortcut which more or less gives the approximate answer. Okay? But if you want to do better, if you want to get the exact results, then we really have to rely on these differential equations. So let me remind you where we were. Okay? So we said, so the claim that we made is that the values of yi can be obtained. As you will see, this claim is not quite correct. Can be obtained by assuming that the system reaches equilibrium at a temperature of order 10 to the 9K. Now this will justify later. For now, we'll proceed by assuming this to be the case, okay, and see what equilibrium distribution we get. Okay, what are the values of yi that we get? So I'll now remind you the formula for yi that we had derived. So we got the following formula: yi as gi by 2 yn to the power ai minus zi yp to the power zi ai to the power 3 by 2 epsilon to the power ai minus 1 e to the bi by t. Okay. So here Zi is the number of protons inside the ith nucleus. Ai minus Zi is the number of neutrons in the ith nucleus. Ai I have already defined. This epsilon, let me write the expression for epsilon. So epsilon is half Nb. Okay, Nb the total baryon density. Then T times Mp over 2 pi to the power minus 3 by 2. Okay. And Nb, of course, is given by 1 by lambda cube omega b rho c over Mp. So basically, omega b rho c is the matter density, the baryon matter density today. You divide by Mp to get the number density of baryons, and then you divide by lambda cube to get to the early universe, the point at the time, the point of time that you are interested in. And after you do all this, you substitute, okay, the expression for 1 over lambda, you write it as T over T naught. So you got an expression for epsilon. Maybe let me write this. So this expression is T over T naught cube omega b over Mp and then 3h0 square over 8 pi g. Okay, so I'll write an expression for epsilon, which I'll explain. So normally we parameterize H0, we write H0 as 100 H kilometer per second per megaparsec. So it's actually about roughly 70. So H is 0.7. Okay, but we use this parameter H to characterize the Hubble constant, the Hubble expansion rate today, measured in units of 100 kilometer per second per megaparsec. Okay, so we'll, right now the best fit value of H is about 0.7. So that's the value we'll be using. Okay, a megaparsec is 3.086 times 10 to the 24 centimeter. So after you substitute all that, this epsilon turns out to be about 10 to the minus 15 times T over 10 to the 9K to the power 3/2. Okay. 10 to the 9K is about 0.086 MeV. Okay, that's what we have seen. Okay. The only important point here is to look at the temperature dependence, right? This expression had a T to the minus 3/2, but here we got a T cube, right? So there is a net factor of T to the 3/2. Okay, rest are all numerical factors. Okay, all these are numerical factors. Omega B, let me write omega B. Omega B is about 0.04. Okay. So maybe you can, I also write the expression for epsilon in terms of omega B and h square, because that may be useful. It's about 1.46 times 10 to the minus 12 times T over 10 to the 10K to the power 3/2 omega B h square. Okay, and once you substitute the values of omega B as 0.04, h as 0.7, right, and calculate this, it basically becomes like this. Okay. So at 10T equal to 10 to the 9K, it's 10 to the minus 5. So you see the epsilon is extremely small. Okay, at T equal to 10 to the 9K. Okay. And from this formula, we see that small epsilon means that this number is suppressed. So larger is AI. Okay, that means larger the number of nucleons, total number of nucleons that the nucleus has. Okay. This factor makes it smaller. Okay, every time you add an extra nucleon, you get a factor of 10 to the minus 50. And there is a physical explanation that we can give for this. Okay. And the physical explanation is simply that to make a nucleon, you have to put together a lot of baryons together. Okay, AI number of baryons together, protons and neutrons. Okay. And because the density is so low, okay, so NB is actually a small number, right? You have seen that NB over N gamma is a small number, right, of the order of 10 to the minus 9. Okay. So it's extremely unlikely that so many nuclei will come together, right? Even if it happens step by step, right? That imagine that the first two nucleons join to make deuteron. Okay. Then another one joined with it to make helium-3 or hydrogen-3. Okay. But this still requires that at every stage you have a low probability because NB is small, okay, measured by NB over N gamma. Okay. And that's what is reflecting the smallness of epsilon, okay, and the fact that it's harder to create heavier nuclei. Okay. So this epsilon to the I minus 1 reflects that point. Okay, is this clear? Are there questions? Okay, so now let me. Okay, the one more thing I have to say. Okay. How are Yn and Yp determined? Right, that also we reviewed last time. So let me write the equations again here. So we have this equation Yn plus Yp, Yn plus Yd plus YHE3 plus 2H3 YH3 plus 2YHE4 equal to 1 equal to Xn, and Yp plus Yd plus 2YHE3 plus 2YHE3 plus 2YHE4 to 1 minus Xn. Okay. So this is basically telling us that the total fraction of neutrons in all the nuclei must add up to Xn, okay, because Xn was the fraction of nucleons that are neutrons, And this is telling us the total fraction of protons in all the nuclei must add up to 1 minus xn. So the idea is that we'll use this. See, everything here is known. Okay, GI, maybe I should remind you, GI is a ground state degeneracy. Okay, so that's controlled by the spin. So everything here is known. Bi is a binding energy. I should have said this is the binding energy. So the idea is that we will calculate yi in terms of yn and yp and then substitute in these equations to determine yn and yp, and then substitute back here to determine the yi's. Okay? That's how we calculate the y's in the thermal equilibrium. But now we are going to write down some numbers. So actual numbers at t equal to 10 to the 9k. These are labeled as an exercise. Okay, it's just a question of putting the numbers in. So YHE4 equal to yn square yp square times 10 to the 97. Now this may sound surprising, right? 10 to the 97. Let's look at the formula over here. Okay. He4 has ai3, right? So that gives you epsilon to the power, sorry, ai equal to 4. So epsilon to the power 3, right? That's a factor of 10 to the minus 45, right? So you may ask, where did this large number come from? And the large number essentially comes from the fact that the helium has a very large binding energy. Okay, the binding energy of helium is about, I think, 28 MeV, right? And this is 0.08 MeV, right? So you can see that this is a large exponent. Okay? And this exponent is so large, okay, because of the large binding energy of the helium, that it basically compensates for this factor of 10 to the minus 45 and gives you this 10 to the 97. YHE3 is yn yp squared 10 to the 9. YH3 is yn squared yp times 10 to the power 12, and yd is yn yp times 10 to the minus 4. You see, yd, naively we might have expected that this should be the largest because epsilon, there is only a single part of epsilon, right? ai is 2 for this. But the reason that it's small is because the binding energy of deuteron is very low. Okay, it's barely bound. That's why it's 10 to the minus 4. The rest have larger binding energy. Okay? But clearly helium-4 dominates. Now this equation tells us that we also have each of the yi's less than 1, right? That's clear. Because after all the yi's should add up to 1. Okay, the total fraction. So each yi is less than 1. Okay. So this equation by itself tells us that either yn or yp or both must be less than 10 to the power minus 24. How did we get that number? Right? That if you raise it to, so one of them, let's say you look at the highest one. Sorry, you look at the lowest one of this. That's the lowest one. Yeah, imagine they are of the same order. Okay, then its fourth power of this, you will get 10 to the minus 24 because that's 97 over 4. Okay, because this side is of course less than 1. Okay? If one is larger than 10 to the minus 24, then the other one must be less than 10 to the minus 24, right? Because they have to together, they have to give this number 10 to the minus 97. So that's where we conclude this, right? That the smaller of the two must be less than 10 to the minus 24. Okay, either yn or y2. At this stage, we are not committing ourselves, but we will see soon see which one. Now, given this, you see that each of these have either at least one yn or one y2. So each of these factors will have at least 10 to the minus 24. Right? So this means that these numbers are small, smaller than 10 to the minus 12, because this is the largest coefficient here, and if the smaller, if at least one of them is less than 10 to the minus 24, it's clearly less than 10 to the minus 12. This makes it very easy to solve the equation, because now let's go back to the equation again. Okay, if we will look at the previous page, these equations. Right? What this is saying is that from these equations, we can basically draw all the nuclei contribution except the helium-4. So you get yn plus 2He4 equal to xn, and yp plus 2He4 equal to 1 minus xn. Let me write it. So you get yn plus 2YHE4 equal to xn, and yp plus 2YHE4 equal to 1 minus xn. Okay, are there questions? Okay, so now it's easy, because we know that xn, okay, the fraction of neutrons is less than half, right? Because you saw that the neutrons start decaying, right? They have larger mass than protons, so their number gets depleted, and the number of protons get enhanced. So xn certainly is less than half, and this means that 1 minus xn is larger than xn. So from these two equations, yp is larger than yn. Yp is larger than yn. And hence, yn must be less than 10 to the minus 24. Okay, in fact, we'll soon see that yn has to be less than 10 to the minus 48. So now we substitute in this equation again. Okay. So if yn is less than 10 to the minus 24, the first equation, this one, tells us that YHE4 is xn by 2. And then this equation tells us that yp is 1 minus xn minus 2 YHE4, that's 1 minus 2xn. So this is of order 1. If yp is of order 1, then this equation over here now tells us that yn must be of order 10 to the minus 48. Is this clear?
So
Yes, go ahead, please.
xn we are not taking at 10 to the 9 Kelvin, right?
Xn, yes, we'll take a 10 to the 9 Kelvin.
Xn also.
Xn, yes. Because that's where we have to balance, right? This equation is for a given time, right?
Yeah,
At
but
time
the
when
process,
the thermal equilibrium is reached.
yeah, but the process had a bottleneck, we were saying, and
Oh, no, okay. See, Xn is the total number of neutrons.
yeah,
Okay. So at this stage, all the neutrons that are left. So what this equation is telling us that once thermal equilibrium is reached, all the free neutrons are bound into helium-4.
yeah,
See, we cannot change Xn, right? Because strong and electromagnetic interaction processes do not change the change a neutron to a proton and vice versa. Xn changes only by weak interaction, which is a slow process.
What is the 10 to the 9 Kelvin exactly? The point of equilibrium.
Yeah, the point where the thermal equilibrium sets in, where you can trust this formula.
Okay.
That we'll see later, right? Why 10 to the 9 Kelvin? Okay, but assuming that the thermal equilibrium is reached at 10 to the 9 Kelvin, okay, we have to take the value of Xn at 10 to the 9 Kelvin and apply this formula.
Yeah.
Is this point clear? Any other question? Okay. So this, let me write these equations again. So we have YHE4 as Xn over 2 and YP as 1 minus 2Xn. Okay. So this means that the helium fraction, okay, helium to hydrogen ratio is YHE4 by YP equal, that's Xn over 2 times 1 minus Xn. This is by number of nuclei. So if you want by mass, okay, so rho He over rho H, okay, this is the mass density. Then helium is 4 times the hydrogen, right? The mass of the helium is 4 times the hydrogen because helium has 4 nuclei, hydrogen has 1. So that's 4 times YHE4 over YP. That's 2Xn over 1 minus 2Xn. I think this should be 1 minus 2Xn. Let's go back. Yeah, 1 minus 2Xn. Yeah, that's from this formula. So this is saying that the 2Xn is the fraction that is helium and 1 minus 2Xn is the fraction that is proton. And if you really trust this formula, then it basically says that all the other fractions are like 10 to the minus 24 or well, see, this is if yn is 10 to, yeah, yn is 10 to the minus 48 we saw, right? So these are really negligible. They're like my 10 to the minus 40. But we will see that that's not the case. With these numbers are not that small. Okay, so equilibrium analysis only can give the helium 4 number correctly, okay, but not these numbers. Okay, and the reason we'll see later. But the helium number, okay, the helium to hydrogen ratio is determined like this by this. Okay. And now if you use the value, okay, so at T equal to 10 to the 9K, if you look at the table that we derived, that we obtained, Xn is about 0.133. So this is roughly 0.27 over 0.73. And this comes pretty close to what you observe in nature. Okay, other questions? And once you understand why 10 to the 9K, we'll also be able to determine roughly the error that we make in determining this number. Okay, and we'll see that the error is not very large. Okay, about 4% error in determining the fraction, determining Xn. Okay, other questions? So let me now go to the remaining task. And that is to show that equilibrium is established at 10 to the 9K. Okay, what is spatial about 10 to the 9K. So for this, let's recall what kind of processes are responsible for equilibrium, okay, for the heavy nuclei production. So P plus N going to D plus gamma. This is electromagnetic. Okay, so this is EM. The rest are strong. Okay, there are also other EM processes which are weaker, but the first starts with EM. Then you have D plus D going to He3 plus N. D plus D going to H3 plus P. Then D plus He3 going to He4 plus P, and D plus H3 goes to He4 plus N. Okay, so these are all strong interactions. So these are fast rates, and we'll see when we write down the cross section. They're strong. So now let me explain the physical reasoning why it takes a while to establish equilibrium. And the point again is what I have mentioned, Dalton bottleneck. So, but let me now explain in more detail what it means. So you see that every process begins with deuteron, right? That you have that these processes that you first make deuteron and then you make the rest. So deuteron serves as an intermediary, okay, before these processes are begin. But if you look at the density of deuterons, the formula for the density of deuterons, here, this density actually is low. Okay, so it takes a while before the deuteron density builds up enough so that you can build the other heavier nuclei. And for that, the temperature has to fall. Why falling temperature helps? Falling temperature helps because of this formula. You see that it will be Bi by T. So deuteron density is small because the deuteron binding energy is small. Nevertheless, as long as if T is sufficiently low, then this term can dominate, and this will help produce a lot of deuterons, and those then can get transformed to heavier nuclei and eventually forming helium. So that's basically the bottleneck. Okay, that because of the low binding energy of the deuteron, this process starts late. Now we'll try to do some explicit calculations to see exactly what's going on. So let's first calculate the rate of this process. Okay, the rate of this process. So that's the rate per neutron, say. So rate per neutron is sigma d V NP. Okay, rate per neutron. So you have to know the proton density. Sigma d is the differential cross section. No, it's the total cross section of this process. And V is the velocity of the relative velocity between the neutron and the proton. So this quantity, of course, you can read out from low energy nuclear physics, and that's about 4.55 times 10 to the power minus 20 centimeter cube per second. And NP, you know what it is, right? NP is of order NB times is of order NB, and NB in turn is of order, let me write, this is T over T naught cube times omega B 3H naught square over 8 pi G. Okay, so everything is known, so you can estimate this process and ask at which temperature is it in equilibrium. So I'll leave it an exercise to check that this combination is just numerical exercise. You have to put in the numbers. NP is roughly 0.3 times. Oh, I'll write the full answer first. Okay. So at this stage, I can just write XP. Okay, maybe I should, or 1 minus. Okay, because nothing really has form. Okay, we will see that this is nothing really has form. So XP is 1 minus Xn. Now, on the other hand, lambda dot over lambda, we can also calculate because that's what you have to compare it with, right? The expansion rate. This is square root of 8 pi G by 3 times rho. And rho in turn is calculated from this formula half AB T to the 4 times, here the rho gets contribution mainly from the photons and the neutrinos. So 2 from the photon and then 7/8 times 6 neutrino spaces, and then you have to multiply by T nu over T to the power 4. Okay, so everything again is known because T nu is known and so on. So you can calculate then. Okay, so you see the lambda dot over lambda goes as T square, and this one goes as T cube. Okay, everything else is just numerical factors. So you can substitute and calculate what this number is. Okay, XP is of order 1, so you don't will not worry about it that much. So exercise again, sigma D V NP divided by lambda dot over lambda is roughly 10 to the power 5 times T over 10 to the 10k times 1 minus Xn omega B H square, right? Omega B H square comes because of the NB, okay, has this omega B H square. So this is 0.04, this is H is 0.7, so H square is about 0.5. So you can put these all together and you can easily convince yourself that this is large. This is large for T larger than 10 to the 9k. Okay, that's the temperature we are influencing. That T equal to 10 to the 9k, also it's large. In fact, this 10 to the 5 over 10 is 10 to the 10. And this is a number of order 0.04 times 0.5, that's 0.02, right? So it's still large. Even below T equal to 10 to the 9k, it remains large for a while. So the conclusion then is that this reaction is in thermal equilibrium. There's no problem with this reaction. This reaction is in thermal equilibrium. Later on, we will see that these reactions, even though they are faster, they are strong interaction. They are not in equilibrium because their number will be proportional to ND, and that remains small. Okay, and that's the reason why the fact that they are strong interaction, that's about 1,000 times, the cross section is about 1,000 times larger than this, but that doesn't help because the D density is very low. So the conclusion for T larger than 10 to the 10k, 10 to the 9k, Pn d gamma system is in equilibrium. So assume for now, okay, which will be verified later, that the heavier nuclei are not in equilibrium and are not produced. Heavier nuclei are not produced appreciably at this time. This is to be seen later. So if we assume this, then we have a similar formula. But so we use a similar formula. We use a formula similar to what we had earlier. To determine the density of D. Okay. But we'll use a different symbol, okay, because we are now assuming that only this system is in thermal equilibrium, P and D gamma system. Okay, we are ignoring the heavier nuclei. Okay. So the formula will be Y tilde D. Let me write 3 by 2. 3 comes from GD. This is the ground state degeneracy of the deuteron times Y tilde N, Y tilde P. We'll see the difference between these Y's and the Y tildes times 2 root 2. 2 root 2 because our deuteron has A equal to 2, right? So 2 to the power 3 by 2, that gives this 2 root 2. Then the epsilon and e to the power BD by T. Okay. And the other two equations that we have to use to determine Y tilde P and Y tilde N is Y tilde P plus Y tilde D is equal to 1 minus Xn, and Y tilde N plus Y tilde D is Xn. Is this clear? So this is the equation that now differs because we are not allowing the other heavy nuclei. We are assuming that the other heavy nuclei are not produced, right? But we will see self-consistently that assumption actually is justified. Okay, because the heavy nuclei will not be in equilibrium by this time. So if we use this formula, we see that at around 10 to the 9k, 10 to the 9k, epsilon is of order 10 to the minus 15. And e to the bi of bd over t is of order 10 to the 11. Okay. So this gives Y tilde D to be still a small number. 3 by 2 Y tilde N, Y tilde P, 2 root 2 times 10 to the minus 15 times 10 to the 11. Okay. So this is still small. Okay, it remains about 10 to the minus 4. which is a small number, and that's the reason why the other reactions, why these reactions are suppressed. Now, there is in fact something more that we want to study here, okay? And that is that around 10 to the 9, a small change in temperature makes a big change here. So let's see this. Okay? That suppose T is 0.75 times 10 to the 9 K. Okay, it changes by this fraction of 3/4. Then e to the BD by T. Okay, how much will it change by? It will go to 10 to the power 11. Okay. And then because T has gone down by a factor of 3/4, okay, it will be multiplied by 4/3. So that will be like 10 to the power 15. Okay, 44 by 3. So that can compensate for this 10 to the minus 15. So even though y tilde d was small at t of order 10 to the 9, it changes rapidly to a number of order 1 by the time t has come down to 0.75 times 10 to the 9. The converse is also true. If t was a little larger, then this number will be much smaller than 10 to the 11, and y tilde d will be even smaller. So there is a sharp change in y tilde d from being very small to something of order 1 by the time t changes by a small amount across 10 to the 9k. And by small amount, I mean, say, within 25%, right? As t comes from 25% above 10 to the 9k to 25% below 10 to the 9k, y tilde d changes by large fraction, large ratio. Here, for example, it goes from 10 to the minus 4 minus 10 to the 11 to 10 to the 15, right? And compared to that, the other dependence on temperature that comes from these, okay, or epsilon has a temperature dependence, those are negligible. Okay, so basically it's this that controls how fast this y tilde d changes. Is this point clear? So because of this sharp dependence, we can actually determine this temperature within reasonable accuracy. Okay, and by reasonable accuracy, I mean within 25%, because you saw that as you go from 25% above to 25% below, it goes from a tiny number to a large number. And once y tilde d becomes sufficiently large, then of course these reactions are not suppressed anymore. Okay, then these reactions are not suppressed anymore, and we can in fact get equilibrium of the system through these reactions. So this is essentially the argument that pins down this 10 to the 9k. Okay, we'll try to now write down the result for these cross sections, and we'll see that indeed is the case. So d plus d going to H3 plus P. Here, the product of the cross section times the relative velocity. See that we are always writing the result for the cross section times relative velocity, because if you go back to your QFT1 results, you will see that expression for the cross section has a 1 over relative velocity in the as a proportionality factor. Right? So in the non-relativistic limit, when v is small, this combination actually approaches a constant, right? That's why we write in terms of sigma times v. Okay, and here these are all non-relativistic particles. Because the temperature is much below the masses of these. So this is about 1.8 times 10 to the minus 17 centimeter cube per second, and d plus d going to He3 plus P. Sigma V is of order 1.6 times 10 to the minus 17 centimeter cube per second. Okay, so roughly the same order because they are both strong interaction cross sections. So you can calculate from here the total rate. Per deuteron, per D. So these are all, of course, per D. That sigma V ND. This time you have to use the deuteron density. And I'll leave it as an exercise. ND formula we have already found. Let me call it N tilde D. Okay, assuming that no other nuclei has formed. So you use this formula. Okay, Y tilde D times NB, that's N tilde D. So N tilde D is what we had called Y tilde D times NB. And I'll leave it as an exercise to check that sigma V ND divided by lambda dot over lambda. Okay. I'll now write in terms of 10 to the 9k. So this is roughly T times 10 times T over 10 to the 9k to the power 5 by 2. Okay, temperature dependence you can easily figure out. Okay, because lambda has same temperature dependence, ND has temperature dependence, and so on through epsilon. An exponential of 25.87. This is 10 to the 10 9k over T. Okay. So this is the deuteron binding energy. Okay, so deuteron binding energy BD is, you can read from this formula, 25.87 times 10 to the 9k is about 0.086 MeV. That's a little above 2 MeV. Okay, that's where this factor comes from. Sorry, I think I made a mistake. 25. I should have written it differently. Okay, I normalize it this way. Okay, roughly the idea, what is the idea that T equal to 10 to the 9k? It's about 10. Okay, so I have just written it this way. I could have just expanded it and absorbed it inside this form. So that means the rate is about 10, this ratio, the ratio. This ratio is about 10 at T equal to 10 to the 9k. But again, it changes sharply. It drops sharply for larger T. Okay, as you saw, a 10% change in T will make it drop by 10 to the 4, 1 over by a factor of 10 to the 4. So drop sharply at larger T and rises sharply at lower T. And it's essentially controlled by this factor, the deuteron binding energy factor, because as T changes through 10 to the 9k, okay, this number increases or decreases rapidly. Is this clear? So a more detailed analysis shows that nucleosynthesis happens between 10 to the 9k and about 0.75 times 10 to the 9k. So the range is about 0.75 to 1 times 10 to the 9k. So uncertainty is about plus minus 10%, right? We took the middle value. Uncertainty, this is uncertainty in temperature, is about plus minus 10%. But you will see that it actually translates to an uncertainty in the determining the helium fraction to about 4%. Okay, and we'll see how that comes up. Okay, are there questions up to this point? Okay, so now recall that this is radiation dominated era. So uncertainty, so time, so T is proportional to T square. So this means that the uncertainty in T is about 20%. But what is T about around this time? Okay, so T at this time at 10 to the 9k, 10 to the 9k is 168 seconds. Right? This again you can read out from the table. So the uncertainty in T is about 168 plus or minus 168 times 0.2 seconds. Okay, so this is the uncertainty. Okay, 168 is around the mean value, but uncertainty is what we are interested in. It's about 168 times 0.2. Now, neutron mean life, okay, because see, ultimately you are interested in determining the uncertainty in xn, right? So you have to now ask how xn is changing with t, okay, because then you can translate the uncertainty in t into uncertainty in xn. So dx and dt. See, at this time, as we discussed, that the dominant contribution to change in xn is because of the neutron decay. So you can just forget about other processes and just use the neutron decay formula. So that's of course simple, right? It will follow the simple exponential law. So dx and dt is given by minus xn times some number, and that number turns out to be 1 over 880 seconds. So 880 seconds is the mean life. (880 seconds) is the mean life of neutron. Mean life of n, which differs from the half-life by a factor of log 2 1. Okay? Because half-life is the time in which the number falls to half of its original value. Mean life is basically the time in which the number falls to 1 over e times its original value. Anyway, so dx and dt is this. Okay? So this means that delta xn in this much time, okay, how much will xn change in this much time? That will be, that's the uncertainty in xn. So that will be plus minus xn times 168 times 0.2 over 880. And this number is about 0.04. So this is saying that this kind of argument, okay, without doing any detailed calculation, basically determines xn, okay, with an accuracy of about 4%. Okay, so you can make a 4% error in doing this. Okay. If you want to do better, of course, you can do numerical evolution. Okay, and that's what is done to get more accurate values of everything, in fact, of the yns. Okay, other questions? Okay, so let me write again. So delta xn is about 0.04 times xn, and since YHE is basically 2xn, this means that the error in determination of YHE by this argument is about 4%. Okay. Okay, so now let's go back to the other nuclei. What about the other nuclei? So if you look at the equilibrium values, right? Equilibrium values. We had this formula YHE4. Let me write this once more. Yn square at this is at 10 to the 9k. Yn square Yp square 10 to the 97. YHE3 is Yn Yp square 10 to the 9. Then we have YH3 is Yn square Yp 10 to the power 12, and Yd is Yn Yp 10 to the minus 4. Okay. So now this equation tells us that since Yp is of order 1, Yn is of order 10 to the minus 48. That gives this as 10 to the minus 40 roughly. This is Yn square, so this of course is much lower. Okay, but I'll not even write, maybe 10 to the minus 96 plus 12. What is that? 10 to the minus 84. And this is 10 to the minus 52, right? So really tiny numbers, right? I mean, these kinds of numbers you are never going to see. But actually, this is not what happens. So in actual practice, the number densities are larger. Densities of D, H3 and He3 are larger. And this happens because of the following. Okay. So basically the point is the following, okay, that you see, if you look at the processes, let me go back, all the other processes that are responsible for, look at all these processes. Okay. If these numbers are really as tiny as we got there, then these processes will be way out of equilibrium. This will never happen, right? Like something of the order of 10 to the minus 40, right? I mean, nothing can compensate for this 10 to the minus 40 because the cross sections are not that large. Okay. So what this is saying is that once the number starts falling, okay, say trying to reach equilibrium, okay, once the number densities fall below a critical value, these processes basically stop occurring. So now these would have normally converted all the deuterium, helium-3, helium-4, helium-3, hydrogen-3, everything into helium-4, because this is, according to equilibrium values, this dominates. And this dominates because the helium-4 has the largest binding energy. That's about 28 MeV, as I said, which basically in statistical equilibrium that dominates over everything else. But this has to happen during a dynamical process, and during the dynamical processes, once the deuteron and the other densities fall sufficiently low, then these processes simply stop happening. And that's the physics. That's the way we can determine the rate of depletion of the actual equilibrium values of these other other quantities. So let me just describe a simplified analysis, okay, but the more detailed analysis can be done. So suppose if the only reaction involving D had been D plus D going to He3 plus N or H3 plus P, then the reaction rate per deuteron D would be sigma D V ND. So you compare it with the relevant quantity is sigma D V ND over lambda to over lambda. So basically what happens, the deuteron density, okay, at some point starts decreasing. Okay. You see, according to this formula, let me go back again. Yeah. So if you look at this formula over here, the deuteron fraction calculated assuming that no heavy nuclei are forming, then this number will grow as the temperature falls because of this e to the bd over theta. Okay, this number will grow. Okay, here you look at this. Because of this, this number will start growing as temperature falls. But once the other processes start happening, okay, as you saw, that starts happening around 10 to the 9 K, then the deuteron starts getting depleted. Whatever deuteron is produced starts getting depleted into forming the heavier nuclei like H3, He3, and eventually He4. Okay. So the deuteron density reaches a peak and then it starts falling. Okay. It reaches a peak because it becomes more favorable to produce it by the NP collision, okay, energetically. Okay. Maybe I should have said it differently. Okay. The NP collision, of course, produces deuteron, but the reason that it is small, okay, is that because of the large number of photons, okay, the deuteron by colliding with the photon basically gets dissociated, right? And that's the equilibrium value. So the equilibrium value is telling us that when for which value of deuteron density the two rates are balanced, right? The N plus P going to D plus gamma and the reverse reaction, D plus gamma going to N plus P. And this balance, the value at which it's balanced, it starts increasing as temperature falls because the photon energies are decreasing. Okay, so it becomes more difficult for the photons to break up a deuteron, and the deuteron keeps forming out of proton-neutron fusion. But at some point, once the deuteron starts interacting and producing heavier nuclei, the number density starts decreasing again. And then you can ask at what point that production of heavier nuclei stops. And that's what stops when this number is of order 1. So the system goes out of equilibrium when sigma D V ND over lambda dot over lambda falls below 1, and this determines ND.
So would you go back a couple of pages?
Yes, okay.
Where we actually stated where this 10 to the 9 brings ND up enough. I mean,
Okay, yeah.
the strong reaction. Yeah.
Yeah, so here, this is the formula. So ND is going up here, right? As long as you assume the no heavy nuclei are forming, the number of the number density is going up as temperature falls.
Yeah. And in the next page,
Yes,
we are comparing the reaction rate with the expansion rate.
yes.
And what did we see here? At 10 t equal 10 to the 9, what happens to this?
This is of order 1. This becomes of order 1.
And that is why we said, right, that at t equal 10 to the 9, this reaction has started, the strong one.
Exactly, yes.
And we'll say the same thing again, that since this reaction has started, all the D will get depleted and it will go below 1.
Yeah, yeah. So the point is that you have to balance, right? That's why you are using the equilibrium formula. Right? So as I said, so this is a rough argument. If you want to do the thing carefully, okay, you have to basically do the what should I say? You have to do the numerical analysis. But this gives an estimate. You are right that roughly the value of ND at this point is what will remain. After this, the ND will get depleted, but it will also get produced by the PN fusion, right?
Yeah, so I mean, there is no change. I mean, there is no time for equilibrium because any excess ND has already gone into.
Exactly, exactly. So after this, the excess NDs are getting sucked into heavier nuclei because strong interaction has become dominant, right? So as soon as the ND is produced, it's basically taken away by producing heavier nuclei. But you see that it cannot be taken away faster than this because then this reaction rate will drop again, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the argument. So that's the way we determine the final density of ND. Because once all the neutrons have gone, okay, then ND is not increasing anymore because all the neutrons have gone. They have gone into heavier nuclei. And so now ND starts decreasing. But once it decreases a little bit below this value, this reaction falls out of equilibrium. And that's the equilibrium value of ND.
And all this is happening at 10 to the 9 Kelvin only.
Yeah. So all this basically happens between 10 to the 9K and this 0.75 times 10 to the 9K. If you actually carry out the numerical evolution, that's what you see.
Yeah, I think ND is not even changing then. Like, I mean, only the
Yeah,
excess.
you're right. That ND after this time, right? ND is not even changing because any excess ND that is being produced is being converted into heavier nuclei.
Yeah, instantly.
Instantly, exactly. Right. So basically, what is happening is the neutrons are going through ND and getting into the heavier nuclei. Right. Eventually, ending up inside helium.
Yeah.
Okay. So this argument is a little, I mean, somewhat not quite correct because the actual interaction, okay, is not just deuteron with deuteron, but deuteron with helium-3 and deuteron with hydrogen-3. Those collisions will also deplete it. Okay? So you should really set up the combined equation for the deuteron density, hydrogen-3 density, and the helium-3 density, and then see what the final relic densities are. But the physics is this, right? That once the densities fall below a certain value, then it stops decaying, it stops getting depleted because the collisions don't happen. Okay, and that's where the system rests. Is this okay? Are there questions? Okay. And so let me just say one more point and then maybe I'll stop here. Okay. So then we produce, okay, so this process process leaves us with some ND, NH3 and NH3. Besides proton and He4, which are the main components. But H3 actually is unstable, so H3 basically decays to He4. I think the lifetime is of the order of 12 years or something. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay. So what we observed today, as He3 abundance is actually the sum of H3 and He3. In the during nucleosynthesis. So basically, when you run the program, you can forget about this 12 years lifetime. So you calculate separately the H3 abundance and He3 abundance, besides the deuteron abundance. And then at the end, when you actually want to compare this with experiment, okay, you will add up the H3 and, what did I write? H3 doesn't decay to, it decays to He3. Plus other stuff, of course. So what we actually observed as He3 abundance today, okay, is the sum of the H3 abundance and He3 that are produced during nucleosynthesis. And finally, I should add that these numbers do not include production of these elements in the stars. Stars which happen much later. So when you actually want to compare them with experiments, okay, we basically look in regions of the universe which have not been polluted by creation of too many stars, because there we expect that the abundance that we see is what we actually had during nucleosynthesis. Okay. But clearly, if you see inside a star, okay, the numbers will be very different, right? Because, for example, the hydrogen is getting converted to helium inside a star. Okay, so when you talk about primordial abundance, you have to only look in regions which do not have too many stars. Okay, so that they are not, the numbers are not polluted by star production. Okay, other questions? Okay, so I think I'll stop here. Next time I'll say a few words maybe about the heavier elements, and then I'll move on to another topic.
Sir, in this course, will we do something like galaxy formation?
Well, we'll not do galaxy formation because I'll stop at the last scattering, okay, or recombination, okay, and then I'll go back in time. Okay, so in this course, we will not discuss galaxy formation.
Okay.
So you can say this course is basically between the era between the inflation and the last scattering.
All right.
But you need another course if you want to study structure formation, right? Which includes galaxy formation, of course. Where basically you take the perturbations which are there in the cosmic microwave background, and then you have to evolve them forward in time and see how structures develop.
Is it in the other book that you like suggested earlier?
I think Weinberg's book itself may have some amount of structure formation. I'll check.
Okay.
But then there are specialized books devoted only to structure formation. And much of that is done numerically. Okay, because see, basically what happens when the perturbations are small, you can do it analytically because then it's linear analysis, right? And that part we'll do. I mean, even before the last scattering, okay, we have to evolve the perturbations by linear evolution. Okay? But the difficult part comes once the perturbations become of order 1. And then you need nonlinear evolution, right? You have to look at the full set of nonlinear equations. And there you have to basically use numerical tools to study structure formation. And what people do, you put in various kinds of dark matter, right? And see, for example, what kind of dark matter has what effect on structure formation. And that way you can rule out one kind of dark matter from another. But that part we are not going to do in this course. Any other question? Okay, so if not, I'll stop now and we'll continue. Okay, tomorrow there may not be a class. I'll let you know by mail tonight. Okay, either there'll be no class tomorrow, in which case I'll reschedule it, or there'll be a shorter class tomorrow. Okay, but I'll let you know by tonight.